Well, good morning, everyone. I hope that for those of you who celebrate Passover, you had a blessed Passover. And for those who celebrate Easter, happy Easter. It's good to see your faces this morning. It's good to see the saints marching in digitally through the number of participants that continues to scroll. Good to have you this morning. And thanks to David Berry, our accompanist, who recorded the music that was playing before we all came into the meeting. David is so talented and creative, and we're grateful that even now he continues to be a part of our congregation. Just a couple of announcements. You'll be muted throughout the service. At the end of the service, we'll give a moment for folks who wish to leave, and then we'll divide people up into groups of about 5 to check in with each other. After that, you'll be invited back into a larger room for some coffee hour fun. That's really a neat moment. I hope you'll partake in that. And we'll have more instructions at the end of the service. I want to ask you, except for the time when we're doing the prayer, and you'll see a slide that invites you to place joys or concerns in the chat room. If you could not chat during the service, that would be really helpful to the service participants. It gets a little distracting when it pops up on our screen, so thank you for that. I want to share some great news with you. We received our Paycheck Protection Program grant through the CARES Act. So we're still finalizing the paperwork, but essentially that means that we can guarantee pay for all of our staff for at least the next 2.5 months while we figure out the other financial implications of COVID-19. So a big thank you to Sue Ringler, who just did an incredible job of shepherding this. Thank you to Deanne McClanahan for all the work she did to get us here. We got our grant, and so we're really grateful for that. Well, let's begin our service this morning. We come to worship this Easter in a time of paradoxes. Life persists, and life will never be the same. In this hour, let us resist rushing to the conclusion of it all. Let us live in this moment, celebrating the abundance of life on such audacious display in these months. Come, let us worship together. I want to invite you to draw near your chalice, your candle, whatever it is you have there at home, and read with me the words that we read every week as we light our chalice. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning and happy Easter. I'm Mary Rothschild, your worship associate this morning, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Virtual Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation on Zoom. Easter has always been a big holiday for me, and for our congregation, this is our 55th anniversary of our founding, so that's special as well. When I was growing up, I loved Easter, and then I did as a mom, and now I do as a grandma. I make special colored eggs that I dye with old silk ties. I celebrate Maundy Thursday, which is the day of the Last Supper or the First Communion. I always have a big brunch or big dinner for friends, and I still love Easter egg hunts. I consider myself a Christian Universalist, and I have always seen my joining Unitarian Universalism as drawing my circle wider, not rejecting the faith of my youth, which was a very liberal Christianity, but adding to it. I love the notion of resurrection, which I think spring shows us every year, especially here in the desert, but I have never believed in an actual physical resurrection after death, for instance. When I was a kid, however, it wasn't theology that interested me. It was coloring eggs, chocolate bunnies, and egg hunts. I loved it all. But in the Pacific Northwest, where there's something wrong with my screen, but I'm going to go on unless I need to stop. Somebody can tell me. But in the Pacific Northwest, where I grew up, we were far more likely to have rain at Easter than sunshine, like we have here. And rain and Easter egg hunts aren't really compatible. So my parents, in full consultation with the Easter Bunny, who was incredibly overworked when it rained on Easter, devised a different way to celebrate and have a kind of egg hunt. We kids called it the Spiderweb Egg Hunt, and we had them several Easter Sundays. Again, with the permission of the overworked Easter Bunny, my parents would make up our baskets and hide them all over the house. Our family business was a dress factory, and we had lots of big cones of thread from the factory that my parents would use to tie a different colored thread on each basket and go up and down and around and even into the attic and in and out, making an incredible spider web that ended with a cone of thread at each of our places at the kitchen table, each a different color. We would oh so carefully take our cone of thread and wind it up wherever it took us. We often had to duck under someone else's colored thread, and we had to be incredibly careful not to break either our thread or theirs. It was a lot of intense work, but extremely satisfying and exciting when we finally found our baskets. Our spiderweb egg hunts are a very happy memory of my childhood. 45 years ago, I moved to Arizona to be a professor at ASU, and I did not immediately love the desert, as some people do. But I do remember as the first Easter approached thinking, boy, it's going to be great not to have to talk to the Easter Bunny about how to handle an egg hunt in the rain, because it's never going to rain here on Easter. And it never did until exactly 30 years ago on Easter morning when I was giving a brunch for 25 people, including 6 young children, though mine were older at that point, and I thought, what on earth are we going to do? It was really and truly pouring rain, like a monsoon in August. And then I remembered our spiderweb Easters, and I quickly emailed the Easter Bunny to ask if he would mind if we made a spiderweb Easter egg and hunt, and we'd take over the work, so he would have more time to deal with other problem egg hunts. He happily agreed, and our whole family scurried to put together Easter baskets with eggs, candy, and little stuffed chicks and rabbits, and hid them all over our tri-level house. Up and down and around and in and out of rooms, everyone's room was fair game, and we used not the big cones from our long shut factory, but spools of colored thread I use on my sewing machine, which worked just fine. When the families arrived, we explained what was happening and how the egg hunt was changed, but approved by the Easter Bunny, who, like Santa, sees and knows all, and how they would each need to take a spool of thread and follow it to their basket. The youngest child in the egg hunt was a little over 2, and his mom helped him follow the thread and wind his spool. 30 years later, he remembers that egg hunt and reminded me of that at his wedding 2 years ago. The spiderweb Easter egg hunt was a big success, and it also can be seen as a metaphor, which tells us that for how we need to live our lives and how it exemplifies our 7th principle, which tells us that we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Probably never before in the 34 years that I've been a member of VUU has it been clearer to me how completely we are all tied to each other in an interdependent web of existence, and how fragile and gossamer thin this web is, how easily it can be torn or ruptured, but how beautiful it is, glistening just like a spider's web in the early morning dew. As we celebrate this special Easter in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, our 7th principle shines as a beacon of how we all must live, aware at a cellular level of our interdependence, how important everything I do is to you and everything you do is to me. While it is possible that all of us together may not honor our 7th principle, or that some of us will purposefully or accidentally break some of the fragile threads that bind us together, let us all on this edgy Easter recommit to strengthening our dedication to honoring and keeping our web together, fragile, gossamer, and unbroken. Easter is a holiday of hope, of resurrection, of rebirth, like spring. And we can do this, all of us together. So now let us settle into our service. And I want again to welcome you to virtual VUU. We're all so glad you're here. Happy Easter. And now let us join Katie in singing, "Lo, the Earth Awakes Again."
Oh, the earth awakes again, hallelujah, from Marcy, can you hear us?
No,
You're
I
on.
can't. Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. So today I'd like to read for you a book, A Church for All. Sleep to the side. Sorry for that delay. Sunday waking. Day is breaking. Let's go to our church for all. Church bells ringing, joyful noises, choir singing, laughing voices, candles glowing, banners flowing. Come enter our church for all. Weak and healthy, neat and messy. Poor and wealthy, plain and dressy. All embracing, spirit gracing. Each one at our church for all. Bodies wiggling, mommies reading, children giggling, daddies pleading, toddlers flailing, babies wailing. There's room at our church for all. Hands receiving, hands connecting. Hearts believing, hearts accepting. Feel the spirit. Can you hear it? It's here at our church for all.
That's great. Thank you, Marcy. As I've been saying every week, we're deeply grateful for those folks who have continued their giving. And a big thank you if that's you. Thank you for continuing to support the mission of the congregation. But we also know that there are folks in our congregation who have lost work or who have had other changes in life because of COVID-19. If that is you and you cannot continue your giving, as I said last week, all we ask from you is that you communicate with us. Let us know, most importantly, how we can be helpful to you, because that's what a congregation is for, and especially in these times, we need to be there for one another. So if you can continue your giving, there's information on your screen about how to do that. You can text it to us, or you can mail your check to our physical address. But either way, thank you, as always, for all the many forms of your generosity, from the folks who are helping us this morning, Deanne McClanahan and Brian on tech, to all the ways you're giving, both to your communities and to VUU. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, we're going to move into a time now of meditation, a time of prayer, but we're going to continue to sing some of our traditional Easter music. And so I invite you to sing together, "Lo, the Day of Days is Here."
Lo, the day of days is here. Alleluia. Festival of hopes and cheer. Alleluia. Let the south wind
Please join me now in a spirit of prayer. We'll take just a moment with no sound, with no talking, and then I'll offer a prayer that was written by my colleague, Unitarian Universalist minister, retired now, Richard Gilbert. But let's join in silent thanks for the beauty of the earth this Easter. Please, as the slide says, the slide before you says, feel free to post your joys and concerns in the chat room during the prayer and during this next song. This prayer is entitled, "A Tomb is No Place to Stay," an Easter meditation. A tomb is no place to stay, be it a cave in the Judean hills or a dark cavern of the spirit. A tomb is no place to stay when fresh grass rolls away the stone of the winter cold and valiant flowers burst their way to warmth and light. A tomb is no place to stay when each morning announces our reprieve and we know we are granted yet another day of living. A tomb is no place to stay when life laughs a welcome to hearts which have been away too long. Amen. Would invite you now to enjoy Katie's arrangement of "For the Beauty of the Earth."
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source to all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and This our hymn of grateful praise. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
Well, thank you, Katie, and thanks to all here who shared joys and concerns in the chat room there. Know that, as always, the Lay Pastoral Care Associates and I are available if you'd like to have a conversation. If there's something you just need to talk over or process, we're available for that. Well, today, in the midst of a beautiful spring season, we celebrate new life. While our rituals are different, as we distance physically, the Earth's cycle goes on outside our doors and windows. In this season, it's different in the desert, I think, than any place else. In northern climates, folks celebrate the winter finally being over. They've been gazing longingly at their lawns for weeks, willing the grass to turn a brighter green, trying their best to force lilies through the soil with the power of their minds. Here in the desert, wildflowers bloom unbidden, citrus ripens, and the buds that will become next year's fruit perfume the air. Though we're mostly not so excited about summer coming, spring in the desert holds a beauty that stacks up favorably against any place I've ever been. Our desert home teems with new life. In the Jewish and Christian traditions, this has been a week of ceremonially reliving ancient stories. A people under terrible oppression are delivered just in the nick of time by a God who cares for the vulnerable. And in the Christian tradition, a peasant who preached love and compassion and justice is killed by the empire, but ultimately cheats death, and his teachings live on for millennia. These are stories of life persisting when the odds were incredibly long. These days, like our ancient forebears, we are once again facing the specter of death. Of course, we're always in the company of that particular specter, but a lot of the things we usually do to distract ourselves are unavailable to us for now. 6 weeks ago, it's hard to believe it was that recently, we were just beginning to hear about this virus in public that many of us thought was probably just like the flu or maybe even just a bad cold. We were traveling and going to restaurants, having dinner parties, the rituals of life as social animals. Now we know the truth, and for many of us, our days are marked by terrible rituals like checking the daily counts of COVID-19 cases, and for me, wondering if our politicians will choose the market over human life and open businesses too soon, putting us at risk of having to start this time of quarantine all over again. I can promise you, by the way, that at VUU, we will be listening to scientists and medical professionals, not politicians, when it comes to reopening our campus. While there are growing glimmers of good news, it seems to me we're still in the Good Friday phase of our pandemic story. There's a criticism of Unitarian Universalism that frankly I think is often valid. Some say we want to celebrate Easter without pausing for Good Friday. We want to fly right to the resurrection without acknowledging the pain and death it took to get there. But the pain was considerable. Jesus entered Jerusalem during Passover when it was teeming with people and proceeded to criticize the empire in a very public way. He must have known, that he would provoke the Roman leaders. There had been religious uprisings during Passover before, and the Romans were keen to avoid even the appearance that their subjects, the Jewish people, would be able to lead a successful revolt. So they put Jesus to death. As he was dying, Jesus quoted the psalm and cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He felt utterly alone, abandoned. And that, as the story goes, is how he died. His disciples scattered for fear that they would be next. His closest women relatives and friends washed his body and placed it in a grave. A state-sanctioned murder of an innocent person. Grim. But you can't get to Easter without Good Friday. But it's also true that sometimes something has to die for something new to be born. Even in Jesus' terrible death, there was a seed of what was to come, the hint that his teaching would go on long after his life was snuffed out. This, metaphorically, is, I believe, where we're living now. We are in the 3 days before Easter, under the shadow of death. And there is no denying that life may never be quite the same. Here we are, having fled like the disciples into our places of refuge, wondering what will happen next. But even in these painful times, the seed of new life is present. There are dozens of stories, for example, about the effects of our driving less. The air is dramatically cleaner in China, in Italy, in the United States. Measurements of nitrogen oxide are down as much as 60% in some cities and are down 30 to 50% in most places. A Newsweek article from a couple of weeks ago reports, quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic is also likely to have a significant impact on other environmental factors, including the emission of greenhouse gases as the global economy heads into a recession," according to Kevin Rose, assistant professor of biological sciences and career development chair at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. The story says economic recessions and resulting declines in energy use and population shifts can drive dramatic reductions in environmental impacts. For example, the consumption of fertilizers that harms freshwater equality declined for many years in Eastern Europe following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide have declined during many past recessions as energy-intensive economic activities slow. Quarantine protocols may also have a deep but short-term impact on greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants, as fewer people are traveling and fewer businesses are operating, end quote. In the seed of death, there's a hint of new life. And there are more impacts too. Some officials say we're producing less trash because so many of us are working not in businesses, not in big buildings, but at home. Well-worn parks around the world are getting a break from heavy foot traffic. And animals are now more free to roam without the dangers of having too many human beings driving and making noise around the clock. And then there's the personal. I'm noticing some shifts in myself, and I wonder if you are. I thought I was an extreme extrovert. In fact, sometimes I get in trouble with my kids for hanging around and talking too much on Sunday mornings. Once after Christmas Eve service, I was talking to one last person, just wishing them well and hearing about their celebrations. When I turned to my youngest to let her know I was finally ready to go, she loudly sighed, "Finally. If you're here this morning, I'm sorry about that." Because of those extrovert tendencies, I'm prone to letting my schedule get too full of meetings, taking on too many projects, and then finding myself tired and sad and close to burnout because I miss being with my family. In this slowdown, I'm learning that I can handle things a little differently. Turns out I'm okay with being home more. In fact, after some solitude, I feel more energized and ready to tackle big projects. I won't be letting that learning go when our time of physical distancing is over. Something has died, and something new is being born. It's true of our organization, too. We've been tinkering around the edges of using more technology for years. Now we've been cast into the deep end, pushed to jump in head first. This week, I'll facilitate my first small group on Zoom. Our Eastview group is meeting electronically, and I'll be presenting at their May meeting. Now, don't worry, we'll be meeting in person again once this is all over. Of course we will, and I cannot wait for that day. But, I can already see that we won't want to let go of the advances we've made. If we could have half of our committee meetings on Zoom and half in person, for example, that not only keeps us from driving so much, it frees up our space to be used for other mission-related purposes. New life is being born. Now, it won't all be easy. I think we're not so much different from the ancient Israelites. In the years after the Passover, after they were freed from slavery in Egypt, they grumbled and complained about their new reality. They fussed so much that Moses at one point basically said to God, look, you got to either kill them or kill me, because I cannot take these people anymore. He couldn't believe that they even started talking about how they missed Egypt, where they were held as slaves of the empire, just churning out bricks to help the king expand his rule. How in the world, Moses wondered, could they long for those days to come back? But I think they weren't wrong to complain. Yes, their old life was hard, but so was their journey through the desert after they were freed. Food was more scarce. They were always on the move with no place to call home. It wasn't easy. They had to remind themselves over and over that this hard path through the sparse, threatening desert was the right thing, that their freedom was worth the sacrifice, that sometimes something old dies and something new must be born, and that birth is hard work. There are signs that our physical distancing is working. The curve is flattening in New York and certainly in California. Other countries are beginning to experiment slowly with reopening. But what will emerge from the tomb of our distancing will be new life. Life will go on, but we will not be the same as when we went in. Things will be different. It was like that with the Easter story. Jesus died, and it seems to me at least his resurrection was mostly meant that when his followers got together and talked about his teaching, it was as if he was present with them. The earliest gospel hints at this resurrection mystery when it ends not with Jesus up and walking around, but with the tomb being found empty and the witnesses telling no one. Something life-giving happened after Jesus' death, but the way Jesus lived on was not the same as the way he had lived before. New life was different than the old. I think some of the ways that our new life will be different from the old are probably obvious. It'll be hard for many of us, for example, to trust being in a big crowd for a while, at least until we have widespread testing and a vaccine. But that lingering queasiness about crowds might stick around even after a vaccine. And the increased use of technology to connect over distance is almost surely going to stick around. But there's more to it than those. Several months ago, I planted jalapeno seeds in these little planters and lined them up across our kitchen window. It would have been easy in those early days of just watering and watching to think that nothing was going on. But of course, we know that when those seemingly dead seeds are pushed into the earth and provided water and sunlight, life works underneath long before it pops through the surface. We're like those seeds, now going in through an incredible period of, yes, darkness and fear, but also learning and growth. And the main lesson that I believe we as the whole of humanity are learning is that we have the power to do big, important, difficult things and to cooperate across all sorts of perceived lines of difference in doing them. We're in the process of intentionally causing ourselves discomfort to conquer a new virus. I can't imagine that the argument we can't do anything about that big problem is going to be very effective going forward. And we can't afford to make sure everyone has quality medical care, for example. Forget that argument. Old ways have died. Something new is being born in its place. And in some cases, that something is better. It will be tempting when this is over to try to fall back on every old pattern that brings us comfort, to drive as much as we ever did, to fly as much as we ever did, to focus on the things we don't like about technology and refuse to learn new skills, to divide ourselves neatly along political lines. But that is the way of death, and I mean that quite literally. Deforestation is one of the factors that's leading to an increase in human epidemics like Ebola and COVID-19. If we simply get back to consuming the way we were, there's no doubt that this will not be the last pandemic, perhaps in our lifetimes. I say instead, let us choose resurrection. Let us choose new life. Even now, let us be conscious of the things we're learning, that neighbors and family are of utmost importance and worthy of our time, that when we care for one another, we are blessed beyond measure, that we actually have a great deal of control over what happens to the earth. And though the sacrifices we need to make may be inconvenient, they are necessary and they are possible. We can do big, difficult things together. In these Good Friday days, let us keep our eyes on the resurrection to come. New life is aching to be born. May our Easter stories bring new and greater life to come. Amen. Now let's sing together one last time the hymn, Now the Green Blade Riseth.
Now the green blade riseth from the buried grain. Wheat that in dark earth many days has lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. In the grave they laid him, loved by hatred slain, thinking that never he would wake again. Laid in the earth like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. When our hearts are wintry, grieving or in pain, love's touch can call us back to life again. Fields of our hearts that dead and bare have been. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green.
I would invite you now to bring near those chalices that you lit earlier as we extinguish our chalices and read together the words that we read every Sunday as we extinguish our chalice. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again. And now, friends, our benediction. May life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends, and happy Easter, to serve love and to serve one another. I'm going to give folks just a minute to leave if they would like. If you are leaving, please make sure and click Leave Meeting and don't just leave your computer running. And once folks have left, then we'll divide up into breakout groups of about 5 and check in with one another for about 10 minutes. After that, you'll be invited to come back into the big room, and we'll just have some fun, chaos, and seeing each other's faces. I love that time. So feel free to leave if you need to. Happy Easter. If not, then please make sure and accept the invitation to go into a breakout room here in just a moment.
Okay. Well, this is nice. Look at us. Look at us coming together.
How are you?
Everyone.
Bye.
Good. Okay, I'm unmuted. Hey, hello there.
Hey, Roy.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Merry
Easter.
Easter.
That's
all great. Easter.
Good
Good to see you guys.
Many people today. Yay.
Your bonnet. Easter's everyone.
Amen.
Hi, Sandy.
Hug everyone.
Bye.
Easter, thanks, Mary.
Hi, Karen.
I'm not going yet. I'm not going.
Develop them for the seniors, and then they also manage them.
Look at everybody. This is so cool.
Hey, Deanne. Thanks to
Yes.
Deanne and Andy and Katie.
Grandsons.
Yes, thank you.
You know.
Thank you. Do you know Katie recorded all that music for us?
Yeah, so
Oh, that
now
was
they're all
really
shut
good.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much better this
And I
time.
think all the other places
Hopefully the
too.
sound was better.
I hear her voice much better.
Yeah, it was hard to do live.
2 weeks up or 3 wow. She was so furious.
Hey, Mary.
Because this guy
Everybody's gonna buy better.
Doing really good on the technology.
Thanks.
She's so
Ken.
stressed out. I mean, she doesn't feel well.
No, the last week.
You know,
Oh, look.
no, but there are a lot of stupid people out there.
Katie,
I
who's
can
on
tell
your
you that
lap?
much for a variety of reasons. They just do
Karen, I
stupid
love your
things,
hat.
you know, they just.
Oh,
it's
thank
so
you,
cool.
Margaret. Great. I wondered if anybody would get a
I
hat.
don't know.
Happy Easter. Wearing an Easter hat, and then I decided that would be too
You make
much.
a lot of noise.
See, but
Janet, you have kind of an Easter hat. That's an Easter hat. A pet.
yeah.
She's better.
Hi, Vince. Hello,
Hi, Debbie.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rach.
Bill's birthday. So.
Rachel.
Hey, Roz.
Hey, Roz.
Irene.
Hey, Jane.
Guys.
A story. It was a very good story.
Let me forward.
Oh, you want to close?
Well, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
See, the thing is that whoever's loudest will be loudest.
I'm gonna just check the other screen.
I wonder how people find out.
You're gonna have like a ball game.
No,
Melanie, is he got short ears?
Here and now. I
Hey,
mean,
Randy.
everybody needs to stay in.
Hey, Roz.
Out
fun.
and about. That
Very
should
well.
cover everybody.
Hi, Eileen.
From all the
Hi.
Easter. There's Jennifer, everyone. There's Jennifer.
Easter.
All right.
I wish I had one.
What is this? Minnesota, do you know how many
Easter,
lives have been
everybody.
lost?
David. Katie, the music was great.
Is that all?
It was. It's great.
Hello, can we see your cat again?
Oh, sorry about that. She's gone away. Fine. How's everybody doing?
Arizona's about 100, maybe. Because Phoenix is
Russia.
Posting whole wall.
Not like New York, California, or anything, but
Hey, how'd you get to a baseball game, Andy?
Yeah.
The magic of virtual backgrounds.
Saw that. Congratulations, you got to go to the game.
That's
It's
pretty
wishful
nice.
thinking.
2 weeks ago, shut down
Just
her
wishful thinking.
shuttle business because she was trying to disinfect her car after everything, and then
You all look
she had a
great.
couple scares because she picked somebody up, and then on the ride home they mentioned that they were in quarantine because they had come from New York.
Hi, Melanie.
Melanie.
I love your
She had another
ears.
one.
Hi, Melanie.
There's Roberta right there.
Hi, Murphy.
Good to see everybody's faces.
Hi, Bill.
Happy Easter.
Bernie, hi, Bernie. Hey, Bernie.
Great start.
Hello, Bernie.
What's the doggy's name?
Our little Chihuahua's name is Mouse. And the poodle I had earlier is Bella. Andrew's got her.
There you go,
The
Bernie.
whole family.
I love it. Oh, wow.
It's so important to have four-leggeds in the family, I tell you. There are psychologists that sit with that.
Isn't it fun to see everybody's faces?
There you go.
Great.
All right.
Put the kitty cat in the
Get our
dog
dog
box.
up here.
Hey, Libby,
Yeah.
you can, on your screen, you can rename yourself. And I'm going to rename you right now. Whoops. Sorry, can't figure it out. Can you see on your screen where the three dots are?
Yeah.
You can hit rename. I'm just going to. You see that?
Jim's got it. Put it in there.
Got it. That's good. Thank you.
Is that
Oh, there you
Tia
go.
with the mask on? That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm outside.
I didn't know you
Outside
could
of my
do that,
house.
man.
Yep.
Nice to see your kids, Katie.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Katie, how's your new home?
We don't have one yet.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Yeah, still looking.
you know?
Still waiting to appear in your lives.
Ah, here we go.
Hi, Bill.
Animals.
Unpin it.
Can you see everybody? Yeah. Say hi.
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 Really?
Hey, there's Bill.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi, everybody.
They're talking.
Eileen.
Hi.
Hello, Eileen.
All right.
Bernie, you need to unmute yourself. I can't do it. There you go.
It kept saying I
Oh,
could
yeah.
not mute myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Hi,
there are so
Brian.
many settings in Zoom.
It had to be both of us, I guess.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
There's Bernie.
Hey,
Hi, Bernie.
Yeah, hello back to all the people who said hello.
Happy Easter.
Thank you.
Mr. Stone.
To you. Happy Easter to you.
We cannot sing together on Zoom, we found.
Yeah. Doesn't work.
Nope.
Oh.
A common metronome or something.
There we go.
You can sing at the same time, but you can't sing together.
Right.
Yeah.
It all come out.
If we all had gigabit internet, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Lag would be there. I was noticing
Happy
Katie
Easter.
was lagging her voice throughout the whole.
That Katie was entirely
Elizabeth's got her
recorded, Rick.
mask on.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh, okay.
she was lip syncing, and that's why she was
Okay.
late, because she
Well,
heard
then-
herself late.
Gotcha.
I was singing along.
I gotcha.
Good.
Maybe you were all too.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
still recording, by the way.
There's got to be a way.
Yeah,
to
it's
solve
okay.
the-
We'll cut this part off when we're done.
It's fun.
It would be kind of funny to leave it in, actually.
It would be. Yeah.
I got an email from Benji up at UUCP who said that he held a choir meeting with all of his choir on Zoom, and they all sang together. And so I don't know how he did
Wow.
it, but that it was successful. I should
Yeah, I've
ask
been
him how
waiting
to do
to hear how it went.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
what
would be
technology
great,
did he
too.
use to reduce the feedback delay?
The lag,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know.
That's critical because TCP/IP is not designed for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably they would use a UDP protocol to
keep the audio streams in real time, something like that. Something that's like loss tolerant.
That seems to be the biggest hurdle, I think, though, to really feeling like a community at a church service is you need to be able to hear everyone singing. It's not quite the same, but I mean, it's great to have some singing, but if somebody could figure out some way to let the lag time between the audio signal and the video signal across the internet be less, then maybe we could sound and hear each other's voices.
That would be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, just to say nothing of the lag here between the cell phone and video on screen.
That's Eileen. Ah, there I am. That's Liz.
My kid is looking at the phone. Can anybody see her?
What you doing, Murphy?
Let's see. Randy, you have, I see, are you a Cubs fan? Is that the red and white of Cubs?
No, so this is the California Angels. My favorite player is Albert Pujols. He played for the Cardinals, which is really sort of my team, but now he plays for the Angels. So I get to go to Tempe and see him play every year. And this was the trip this year before they shut it down.
You play, and tell us, when did you play? And for whom did you play?
Where's Manna?
When did you play, Andy?
Oh, no, I haven't played since I was a kid, but no, I was just a Cardinals fan.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
you played.
No, they wouldn't let me anywhere near a baseball.
Well, we grew up playing softball, so I.
Happy new home. That was the home.
We did have a church softball team in this little UU congregation that I pastored in Danville, Indiana, and we called ourselves the Hustlin' Heathens in the church league.
Yeah, Joey, Elizabeth changed it to show your picture. Oh, well.
Nice to have Liz as my neighbor. That is so.
That's cute. We should have a softball team.
Yeah, we could call ourselves the tumbling octogenarians, right?
We did have a softball team in the 90s.
Really?
Bye. I think we should revive that.
Bye, David. Bye, Jody.
A guy named Bill Staples was the real organizer of it. And then I think he moved away for a while and came back, and at some point. A while ago.
I met Bill a couple of times. He wrote a really good book on Japanese baseball in the internment camps in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
That was fun. I was on the team, but I was terrible.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Bill took me to the batting cages one time and coached me at it. I went from being an awful batter to a terrible batter.
There might be something I can beat you at.
Oh, probably.
It's just everybody not wanting to leave.
I'm going to go eat Easter lunch, but I just want to say love you all. And
love you and miss you. Love you.
Bye, everybody.
Love you
Have
all.
a great week.
Happy
Love you.
Easter.
Happy Easter.
We're all getting bigger as fewer people end up online here. You each get bigger on my screen.
Goodbye. Happy Easter to everybody.
Happy Easter.
Easter.
Wonderful.
Easter. Going right down there.
Hey, Bernie, take care.
Okay.
Here.
Bye. I'm going to click the end
Ultimately-
meeting button.
Okay.
Have a great week.
Ultimately, it's just going to be a DN on the screen.
Yeah.
The rest of us are going to say bye-bye, and there's going to be DN.
Yeah, I guess I'll leave.